Hello everyone, quick side note, during this video you may hear my AC kick on at random times. It might be harder to hear me, that's just, I can't help that, it's just my apartment. But today we're going to be doing a video, because it's Memorial Day. I'm going to be doing a video on the M1 helmet, which was used by the United States from around, I think, 1940 to the late 80s, around somewhere around that time period. Don't have exact dates, but I have a pretty decent little collection that I can use to show off some of the differences and changes that were made. And so I don't actually have an original of the first kind, but the first kind you would see, and then you use this one as an example, you would have your helmet shell. It's actually two separate parts, the liner and the shell, so they can separate and come apart. And there's a few key differences in the models. So this one is a front seam swivel bail. So seam, there's this line going all the way around the edge of the helmet, made of stainless steel, and during World War II, most of it, they would have the seam at the front. There was a little cut that they would have wrapped it around with. And then after that, during Korea and Vietnam, they would have switched to a rear seam, which was in the rear. So the swivel bail is this part here that swivels, as the name implies. And during World War II, I think until 43, helmets were fixed bail, meaning instead of this swivel design, it was like one big staple that was just stuck on there, just welded right onto it. There was no movement there. But what they realized was that soldiers would go out into the field and sit on their helmets, and that pressure would, over time, eventually break those fixed bails. So they switched to this kind, where if I take the liner out real quick so we can get a better look on that, then you can see this design here. It's kind of like a tube attached to the helmet that this thing runs through. So you can swivel that, and that way when they sat down on it, it would just go out to the side, wouldn't break at all. So that was innovation made in 43, I believe. And so this is probably my most, the closest to World War II helmet I have, because during the war, they would paint these helmets this shade of green, and they would have cork. So they would grind up cork and use it. You can see the texture there. It was kind of heavier on the sides and less so towards the top. I did this myself because I don't have an original example of the corking. So I ordered some from a very reputable company and redid it. But this is pretty much what you would have had during World War II, more or less. And this is a late World War II, so during D-Day you would have seen some soldiers with swivel bails. And this is a front seam example. It's kind of hard to get a look on there. I don't know if the camera is going to be able to pick that up, but that's my first helmet. And I'm just going over shells right now. We will do liners here in a minute. I think the next example I have would be this one here. So let me take the liner out of this. Here we have this helmet I picked up very recently at a reenactment. I just dropped something. Hopefully nothing broke, but very recent. I haven't painted this at all. You can see there's a W on the front. I haven't been able to figure out what that stands for yet, but at the back there is a Sergeant Wright. So this helmet clearly saw some use, and this is again you can very much see the seam right there, but that's a front seam swivel bail as well. You can still kind of get the cork on there. I can't tell if that's cork or sand, but during Vietnam, and I have an example right here, they switched to sand texturing, kind of. So it's a lot more smoother, less pronounced than that corking. And also during Vietnam and Korea, they would have had the seam on the back. So that's that rear seam I was talking about on the back there. Lots of times they would put their chin strap here. Again, swivel bail. I have no fixed bails. And then my last helmet I have to show you is a Vietnam helmet, which has been poorly repainted. Chin strap is broken on this one for the liner, but you can see it's also a rear seam. Kind of harder to see that one than the others, but that is rear seam and swivel bail. But the Vietnam ones, they actually had a smaller profile, so it's about half an inch shorter than the World War II and sometimes Korea M1 helmets that you find most of the time. So that's cool little bit of information about that. Now, those are the shells, and I guess it's time to move on to the liners, which the earliest liner example I have with me, I just had to grab it. It was the one that fell, but this is the earliest liner example I have. I repainted this one. It's already getting kind of scratched up just from inserting it into this helmet here. But, so if we look inside, you can see this chin strap, leather chin strap, which is what they use to attach that. So they would have had the liner by itself for parades most of the time, and when you're not in combat, you didn't want to have that heavy steel shell just lugging around on your head. So most of the times, they would just wear the liner. And leather chin strap here on the helmets, this is a bad example because the end kind of fall off, but they have this different material chin strap, so it wasn't made of leather. But this is the earliest example I have. You can see there's OD3 webbing. So there are two colors of this kind of material that they use. There's OD3 and OD7. OD7 is a darker green, which I will show you in a moment, but OD3 was this. And we can tell this is kind of an early to mid-war World War II because it's got that OD3, and then you can see this little loop here. So during Vietnam, they switched to a different style where they didn't have that loop and it was just layered on top. Kind of like a hard hat, if you will, if you've ever seen the inside of one of those. And we can see it's got this nape strap here for your neck. And another way we can identify World War II era liners in Korea sometimes is by this little hole here. So this is called an eyelet, I believe, an eyelet hole. I think it's what that's called. And I have no idea what the purpose of them is, but I know World War II ones have that eyelet. So that's the earliest one I have. That's in OD3, and you can see we've got that leather sweatband and the nape strap there. Pretty good condition leather chin strap. I think I actually put this on from one of my other helmets that's more destroyed, but if we move on to the next example, this is a really bad condition liner I have, but it's still a World War II liner. We can see by that. I know sometimes they have production markings in here where you can read who made them, but I don't know how to identify that. Then this is really torn up. You can see liners just all tore apart, and we have the leather. It's really dark too. But this one, I could fix up if I ordered some parts, but have not gone to that yet. And we can tell that's also World War II in Korea. It looks to be as OD3. It looks to be OD3. It's a little dark. Might just be damaged, but there's that. Then, I believe really, really late World War II, and during Korea, they switched to the OD7 coloring, which we can see. This has an eyelet hole, so definitely not Vietnam, but we can see this darker green color here. And again, there's that nape strap, but you can see it also has that ring, which is how I can tell it's late World War II or Korea. And that's a nice glossy blackish color. Then the other liner I have here in my Vietnam helmet, we can tell it's a Vietnam helmet because, forgive this broken chin strap, but it is, again, that dark green color, but you can see it's got that kind of hard hat design where they just removed that loop entirely, and now it's just that suspension there, and there's no need for the nape strap because, as I said, the helmets are about ½ an inch shorter, so they're not going to be sitting as far back on your neck as the World War II ones. And there's also no eyelet present, so that is most definitely a Vietnam airliner. And also very late, when they were phasing out the helmets and they were starting to move to the, you see modern Kevlar helmets, they had these liners, or not liners, these covers. This is a M80 Woodland, I believe. And the earliest cover, I don't have an example of any others, but you would see during World War II, I believe it was called the frog skin camo. It was used by Marines mostly. And then during Vietnam, you have the famous Mitchell pattern helmet cover. And unfortunately, I don't have an example of either of those, but, and I'm not going to fiddle with this and put the whole thing on right now, but as you can imagine, it just flips over the helmet, you tuck these things in, and you put it in the liner, and it holds it in place very good. But the last liner I have is actually not a true liner. This is a Euroclone liner. So what happened was a bunch of European companies decided it would be a good idea to produce fake World War II liners. And so we can see this kind of plasticky material here. It's not the same fiberglass material as we see in the others. You can see it's just a green plastic. This leather strap is of lower quality. It's just, these are cheaply made, but you do see these used a lot of times in reenactments. As sometimes if you find a liner in original condition, which is hard to do, they're kind of tore up, and you don't want to risk damaging it at all during a reenactment. As you can imagine, if you're getting shot, you're having to fall, and you don't want to have your helmet bounced away. So most of the times you'll see some reenactors using these liners. It just depends on the reenactment. There's also this sweatband in here. Very strange material. It's leather, of course, but it's a lower just production quality than you would see, of course, in your military grade liners. And we do have the little ring there instead of the Vietnam style, for reasons I'm unaware of. But this will, most of the time, it's in passable enough shape to be able to fit inside your normal, let's see, let me just grab this one. It's in passable shape to be able to fit into here pretty good. It does sit out a little bit, but pretty good. And this is the one I use for recreational use. This liner, I mean. Chin strap buckle works better than the other ones I have. Of course, the broken Vietnam one, of course it's going to work better than that, but this is just, and they cost about $20 on the higher end. I know I got mine for $20 at a reenactment. They're just not high quality per se, but they're definitely passable for reenactments. Even airsofting, you see people with M1 helmets using this kind of liner and stuff like that. You'll see this liner used for. And another fun fact, in the movie Hacksaw Ridge, not very historically accurate if you've ever seen that. It has a lot of inaccuracies, but you can tell their helmets are cheap Chinese knockoffs because this is the kind of liner they have, and then the steel is a kind of shiny-ish, just, it's not, they don't use any originals in the film, so you can very clearly tell that they're fake. But let me go ahead and take this off. And so that is a quick enough summary of the M1 helmet and its usage throughout pretty much most of our modern military history. Of course, after World War I, you had that Brody helm, which I do have one, or the Kelly helmet, but I'm not going to show that now because I don't have a liner for it. But that is mainly your steel helmets for the United States. And one last note before I leave, there was a very early version before, you didn't really see these used much in combat, but before this fiberglass kind of turtle shell, I think that's what they call it, material, which is resin coated fiberglass, very sturdy enough, you know what I mean, especially with that steel over it. And early on, they actually used a paper mache, almost like a cardboard liner, and that did not hold up at all. Those are very rare to come by. You can almost never find good condition originals just because of how much they deteriorated over time, and those are hard to find. Now, they of course realized this is not going to work, so they switched over to your nice fiberglass kind that you see on most. And I believe that green plastic, I don't think the U.S. military ever used a plastic version like that. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on the matter. I'm simply super autistic, so, you know, pardon me if I got anything wrong. But that is about all I have to say about that. So thank you so much for watching if you watched to the end of this video, and I will see you guys next time.